I had stopped by Toby's Bar and Grill around 7 p.m. Friday night. I was dead tired. I'd spent the last 2 days in the Big Apple finalizing negotiations with a major international bank. When the day began, I was pessimistic that we would ever reach an agreement. But shortly after our Friday meeting started, it seemed that unresolved obstacles began falling like dominoes. By noon, there were only 2 stumbling blocks left. We decided to take a break to go have lunch. I found the nearest Jewish deli and ordered a sinfully large pastrami and Swiss cheese on rye bread and enjoyed every bite. When we reconvened at 1:30, George Willis, the bank's lead negotiator, looked across the table and said, "We've made enormous progress. I suggest we split the difference on our last 2 points." George passed the paper across the conference table. I read what he was suggesting. It certainly didn't split the difference equally, but it was well within the bounds of what my partners and I could accept to win this big contract. As you might now, my journal initiated it. George took out a standard Harrow contract form, and I scrawled my initials on the page. "George, I will look forward to getting the official from you on Monday." After another strong handshake, we headed in our separate directions. I was headed back to my hotel to pack up and check out, thinking of staying in town for the night. After all, my fiancée Trish was away from home with her 2 older sisters, stopping at one of Connecticut's ginormous Indian casinos to spend their days at the best pool and spa this side of the Caribbean, and every night at God's choice of the best bars and restaurants. But I thought once again that instead of another night in the same town, I might as well get to Grand Central Station, because I'm taking the Metro North train to New Haven. By 7:30 p.m., I was back on I-91, headed toward Hartford and off the highway by 8, heading through the always popular downtown West Hartford, where I decided to stop for dinner. I'd been in Toby's Bar no more than 4 minutes when I saw my 2 daughter-in-laws to be slide in, to sit down at the next to the last in a large horse show-shaped number of hand-crafted pine community tables. Their husband sat down beside them. The immediate knot in my stomach, the pain that I felt seemed to radiate out from my stomach and spread through every inch of my body, told me that, exactly 8 weeks away, we're in trouble. Supposed to be at the casino with all 3 of my sisters. In-law Trish. I bolted the bar, called Trish, and she answered, "Hello, my love. How's the big city? Same as always, I trust. We just completed successful negotiations, and I am heading to dinner. Oh, how I wish you were here with me." "You're too cute, Chris. I wish you were here too. We had a ball today, no lie. Poolside all day, sipping cocktails and all. I get a mean pre-wedding tan though. Just about to head in to dinner with my sisses." Trish and I talked a few more minutes before exchanged "I love yous" and ending the call, I opened the Find My Phone app and traced Trish's step with the info she'd just given me. I wasn't sure where she was, but the Find My Phone info put Trish somewhere next to a familiar number, Falmouth, Massachusetts, the western tip of Cape Cod. Damn, I thought lucky she'd be alive come Wednesday morning I'd find out. Trish Long, time neighbor and friend Nick Flaherty and his family had a Hugh house, and had us there a bunch rooting around in my contacts. I found Nick's wife Sue's number, called her. Sue replied, "Hi," I said. "Sue, it's Chris Harrington." Chris Harrington. What a pleasant surprise. How are the wedding plans going? Nick and I can't wait for the festivities. I'm not exactly sure how the plans are going. Sue laughed. It's a typical guy response. So, did Nick have to take a trip this weekend? Well, that's a strange question. Nick rarely has to travel on the weekends, but he's away this weekend. What's wrong? Sue asked with some concern in her voice. Do you happen to have a Find My Phone app? Sue asked and then nearly broke into sobs. Not again. A minute later she continued. He's supposed to be in Philadelphia, but the beacon says he's at his family's cabin. I whispered, I'm sorry, Sue. Nick and Trish are together. Sue cried softly for a few minutes. This isn't a first-time thing, she noted. I'm going to call that son of a and tell him not to come home. I hesitated for only a second before asked if I could share a favor with her. Trish isn't due home until Sunday afternoon. Same thing with Nick. Let's postpone our confrontation until tomorrow evening. In the meantime, I'm going to change the locks on my condominium doors and withdraw half of the wedding money from our joint account. I will pack all her clothes and other personal items and leave the bags in the driveway. You're right, Chris. I'll do the same. Please write or call if you need to talk to someone. I'm sorry I had to tell you. Sue started crying again, and between sobs she said, "It's not your fault, Chris. My last call was to Billy Jones, a friend and neighbor. I need help, Billy. Will you be home tomorrow morning? My only plans are to sleep until noon, but Sally will wake me up at 7 Dasai. What can I do for you? Can you change the locks on my front door and the door leading out of the garage and change the code on your garage door opener? I will be very grateful." There was a moment of silence before Billy said, "Crap, is the wedding cancelled? Unless I'm missing something important. There's no way your buddies are going to let me. A playdate over Lamar, I understand. I'll take care of it first thing in the morning. You ready?" "Yes, Billy, thank you." I slumped to my feet, feeling 20 years older, and dragged my sorry butt back to Toby's, where I made my way to the bar. I caught a reflection of my kids-in-law and their husbands in the mirror as the waiter reached across the girls, clearing the remnants of their appetizers, and then grab a bar stool and take my drink to the black holes where my former future in-laws were sitting. Julie, to her credit, stayed seated. Karen climbed quickly out of the booth and glared between her sister and her older sister. Steve, her husband, said to me without taking his eyes off the girls, "Chris, buddy, what would you like to eat? I'll buy." "No thanks, Steve. I'm not going to stay long," I said as I continued to watch Julie and Karen without speaking, and they tried their best to burn holes right back through me. "What's going on, Chris?" Julie's husband, Roy Hill, finally asked from across the table. "Ask your wife, Roy," I said as Roy and Steve turned to theirs. It was clear that they were both scared to death. "What's the deal?" Steve asked the sisters. "It's not what you think, Chris," Karen said. I bet that's exactly what it was. Steve and Roy looked from their wives to me. Karen's face was streaming with tears. Steve asked again, "What's up, Chris? Your wives are covering for Trish. They were all in cahoots, all in my kitchen last Tuesday." I was headed out of town and not getting home until Sunday. They went to Foxwoods Casino for the weekend. "Where's Trish?" Roy asked the sisters. They let the silence grow, as it had the last time he'd asked. So he turned his glare on me. "She's at Nick's house on Cape Cod." "This is true," Steve hissed. Both women by now were crying. Karen nodded in the affirmative. Julie sobbed. "Trish loves you, Chris. She really does. She and her sisters are pieces of shit. She loves him so much," Steve clicked. At this point, both women were crying. Karen nodded in agreement. Julie sobbed. "Trish loves you, Chris. She really loves him. She really does." She rolled her eyes in exasperation. "Yep, Julie, Trish loves you." Steve's eyes burned a hole through the tabletop. "She has a great way of showing it, Steve. She and her sisters are lying to me, and she's going away for a weekend of sex fest with the old neighbor guy just 8 weeks before she marries me." "Your sister is a piece of shit." "Do not dare," Roy interrupted his wife. "Shut the fuck up, Julie." He turned his eyes to me. "What are you going to do?" "Of course, I'm getting married to them as soon as I can cancel what this slut did in public to my husband and his friend." Both buddies leaned back in their chairs. "Oh, hell, I can't look." Their wives sobbed even harder. "She should just cool off. Daddy spent so much money on the wedding and reception." Karen sobbed. "I don't care. I'm not going to marry a lying, cheating slut like Trish." I waited a few moments. "Do you mind if I talk with Sue Flaherty about Nick cheating with Trish?" We'd both like 24 hours before we crushed them. 4 pairs of eyes looked at me. Roy, Steve, they knew who did and didn't betray a bro. I whispered, "I need your help. Can you make sure?" My head jerked towards their wives. "Can you make sure that they don't contact Trish before 6:15 tomorrow night?" Both women started trying to protest before Steve said, "Course we can, matey, and you." He turned to his wife. "You disgust me. I have to wonder if Julie or your other sisters ever had your back while you cheated on me." Karen was in stunned silence, and Steve finished, "If you or Julie get involved with Trish again in any way, I will consider filing for divorce." Roy's face was bright red arms. I caught her for having dinner with another man. I wonder how many weekends they've shared. No, Trish, I didn't hire a detective. Your boss told me. His words are what brought tears to Julie's eyes. As he finished, Julie gave a sad groan. After the problems we had at the beginning of our 3rd year of marriage, I could have filed for divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences. Rest assured, I'll definitely do it if you contact Trish. I shook hands with both men and left the restaurant. Saturday was busy. It took almost the entire day to get Trish's last few belongings out of our house. Instead of filling the driveway with trash bags of clothes, shoes, and other personal items, I rented a small storage unit and my neighbor Billy let me use his pickup truck. 3 trips and everything was in the storage unit. The hardest part of the day was this. I worked on it in fits and starts all day. Its subject was Harrington and Clark wedding news. Dear friends, I'm in the middle of divorcing my wife of my first 3 years, my dear friend Trish Clark. It was a wonderful weekend when I discovered that my lovely wife Trish was spending it in another man's. I called Sue Flaherty one Saturday afternoon at 5:30. We mostly talked about all the things we both got accomplished that afternoon. Sue was married, of course, so it was much more complicated for her to leave Nick. She'd already met with a lawyer at one point and had one more meeting scheduled at 9 in the morning on Monday. The lawyer told her to cancel joint credit cards and to separate family finances as much as possible, so she followed his dated advice for the Twitter crowd. It was typical legal advice for a marriage where one person figures they're going to be suing for divorce. I said goodbye to her at about 7 until 6, and we each promised to send the other couple a copy of the restraining order. I'm sorry. She then turned to put her dad and little sister in the pew behind her parents. Subscribe to our channel so your kid never ends up with a garlic hater, J/K. We know. Joke's on me. Check out the next story. Our story's got nothing on the next. If you're 18 or older, listen to the next story. If you're not, hear the next one.